Hey guys, welcome back to Critical Flick. Today I'm going to review Damsel, now streaming on Netflix. So I finally got around to checking this film out, and I have to say, it's kind of a mixed bag for me. In this one, we see Millie Bobby Brown playing a young woman named Elodie who is married into a royal family. She's kind of having this arranged marriage with this prince that she can help the people living back in kind of her kingdom that are really struggling. She can take the wealth of this very well-off royal family and bring it back to her home. And then she ends up becoming a sacrifice for this royal family. She's being sacrificed to this dragon from this years-old curse. So it kind of falls into almost a survival horror with the second half of the film. And I think that's one of the best things about this movie is that we have a director who has worked in horror, and he brings kind of those subtle horror elements to this film. Not saying this is a horror film by any stretch of the imagination, but having worked on films like 28 Weeks Later, he's able to bring that kind of tension and almost graphic nature at times. And that unique blend of fantasy and survival, something that I feel sets the film a little bit apart, makes it a little bit more enjoyable. It is just over an hour and a half, and I felt like it moved pretty quickly. I never thought that it was too dull or boring. Another positive part of this film is Millie Bobby Brown's performance. She gives a very impassioned and somewhat physical performance in this one as a woman who is trying to battle against this mighty dragon in this very unforgiving environment, and her trying to work her way through it and kind of rise up and become, the strongest person that she can be. And I think by the end of the film, she has a pretty solid character arc. She does a great job of playing a character you can root for, and obviously, as we've seen in her other films, specifically in the show Stranger Things, she can be really intense, and she brings that to this film, and I think she does a solid job putting that on screen. Because at times this film can be a little bit graphic, nothing too crazy on the scale of like a big horror film, but there is some scenes with physical violence, some wounds, some things she has to go through, cuts and bruises and burns. So I do like that the film tries to take some swings with that. The parts where the movie really falls flat for me is actually the overall story. It's pretty basic, it's pretty bare bones, and I would like to see it more imagined and more fleshed out. We're in this fantasy world, and they never really dive too much into the lore or anything going on. They hint at it at times. We get some ideas of maybe previous princesses or previous things that have happened in the history of this land or of this character or the dragon, and it never really dives into that a whole lot. It's very surface level. The story feels very paint by numbers at times, and I would have liked to just dive in a little bit more, give us a little bit more meat on the bone for this. I mean, obviously this isn't comparable to any of these other, big fantasy epics we've seen in recent years. I mean, we're just coming off of watching Dune 2, which has some of the best and most complex lore, so I can't expect it to be on that level, but I would like to see just a little bit more, just a little bit beneath the surface. Probably the biggest toss-up for me in this film is the CGI elements. I think at times it looks almost downright bad. I thought that it takes me out of the film when some of the scenes just looked kind of almost poorly rendered and green screened, and there's other moments where I think it looks actually pretty good. So I wish it would have been consistent throughout. I feel like besides just the lore and the world around it, I just felt detached whenever we would see some like not so great visual elements, and I would love to see that a little tightened up. And it's hard, as a fantasy genre, we have some of the best visuals ever in a lot of these recent fantasy films and fantasy franchises, and this one just felt like it fell a little bit flat in that whole avenue. But overall, I think as a movie with an empowering character and someone we can really root for, I think it works for what it's trying to set out to do. It's a fun, adventurous movie that I think is worth checking out, specifically if you're a fan of this type of genre or you're a fan of Millie Bobby Brown. It's not her fault that the movie isn't the greatest thing in the world. She's done a pretty solid job of doing some really good projects, and I don't think this is any knock on her. Maybe a little bit setback from such a meteoric success that she's had throughout her other franchise films and her shows, but I do think that it's worth checking out, like I said, if you enjoy those types of things. If you do, let me know what you thought about it. Did you like it more than me? Did you like it less? I always love to hear people's opinions. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and see you guys next time.